Good afternoon. Good afternoon. It's such a wonderful day, and I am so thankful to God for blessing us all to see another Tuesday. This is the 7th of November in the year 2023, and today is PJ, my favorite nephew's birthday. Today is PJ's birthday. Happy birthday to you, PJ. You know Aunt Shirley loves you so much. Enjoy your day to the fullest, to the highest. Oh, yes. Happy birthday. And you know you will get that call and you will get that song, okay? Hi, everybody. Hi, everybody. I know and pray and hope that this is a great day for you. God is yet in the blessing business, and He blessed this day above all the other days. Every day we have new blessings, new mercy because of who He is. He is our all in all, as we say. He is our everything, and I am so grateful to Him because of who He is. This is Point of View. I am Shirley. Cleester, Merethah, and Eula are working today on their jobs, and I am here by the grace of God to bring Point of View to you by the grace of God. Dear God, as I sit before you to speak, I pray to you that my soul you will keep. And if I should die before I finish, I pray to you, dear God, in the name of Jesus, that any outstanding sins will be forgiven. Amen. And you can see our topic here. Does power corrupt or does power entice the corruptible? And oh, I really enjoyed studying for today. Oh my goodness. I am so thankful for these topics that God puts on my mind. I am so thankful. And you'll see that sentence, that quote right there from Abraham Lincoln, and you'll see it all fall into place as I go along. I have two sites that I'm coming from today. Two sites that I'm coming from today. And I want to say that I think it was this Tuesday, so it was Sunday that I announced about James Jackie Boy Clark and L. Wanda McFadden Hamilton. Their arrangements have been made and they will be memorialized. Uh, Jackie Boy will be Saturday, the 11th at 10 a.m. in Denison, and El Wanda will be at 2 p.m. in Sherman. So, all of us that know both of them, that gives us time to go and support the families on Saturday, the 11th of November in this year, 2023. And of course, I am praying for them. I am yet praying for and with each of you family. I am, and then also the Malvern family. Helen Malvern Lawson has transitioned into eternal. Praying for the Malvern family. It's my daughter Gail's aunt. We are praying for the Malvern family. She was my sister-in-law back in the 70s. So we're praying with the family, and we are all still family by the grace of God. So now we'll go into our topic. And for those of you, if you have something going on in your family or like announcements like this, you can send them to me. You can send them to me. You can send them to me. Okay? All right. Now, I'm going into our topics. Does power corrupt or does power entice the corruptible? And as I was studying these two on these two different sites, they all panned out to the same thing. The same thing. And Abraham Lincoln said, most people can bear adversity. But if you wish to know what a man really is, give him power. And oh, as I was studying this, I saw it. So thank you. I'm going right into it. I'm going right into it. and you will see how they come out the same with the same conclusion. I am in psychology today, and this is Adam Grant, PhD. He wrote this, Adam Grant, PhD, and he wrote posted this was posted in April 21st, 2013, and it still stands today. Yes, power corrupts, but power also reveals. So I am going to, no, I'm going to do the other one first, which is Psychology of Political Power. And this is a blog, apaonline.org. And this is March the 11th, it's posted March 11th, 2022. And this is by Peru Verma. And it's apaonline.org. Oh, that's ORG. The Psychology of Political Power. Does power corrupt, or is it magnetic to the most corruptible? And this is awesome. This is awesome right here. And she goes on and she's going to start here. So in January 2022, I attended a conference on political power, morality, and corruption, a Socratic dialogue with fellow scholars led me back to one of the questions that epistemologically haunts political theory and philosophy to date. Does power corrupt, or is it magnetic to the most corruptible? And this right here, I tell you, studying this, studying this, really, really, really let me get the answer that I was looking for. I tell you, it's amazing. It is amazing. It is amazing. And you'll see as I go on. It is so amazing. All right, I'm setting this up right here to make sure that I'm monitoring on YouTube uh, and Facebook, so I can make sure that everything is going well. Okay, now I'm coming back. Now I'm coming back to morality and corruption. Okay, now and she said it brought the question to mind: does power corrupt, or is it magnetic to the most corruptible? And think about this. Once you hear this and think about it, I'm telling you, you will see the truth in it. The cornerstone that this question posits on is antithetical to the idea of power duality as malefic and benefic. Okay? Malefic and benefic. And I did look those words up, and let me just go here and see if I can go right to it. I know you can look them up too, but while I'm on it, I might as well just go to it. And antithetic, it means directly opposed or contrasted. That's what that means. And this malefic, okay, it means causing or capable of causing harm or destruction, especially by supernatural means. Okay, and then I go to the benefic. To the benefic. It tells us that benefic means relating to or denoting the planets. Okay, relating to or denoting the planets, but I want to go back down here uh, and make sure that I come to. It means, it's positive. It can do good. Okay, it can do good, and then it also talks about the planets and all of that. And so it does talk about being good. Let me get this. Let me get this. It means helpful, useful, or good. Helpful, useful, or good. And we could tell it from the beginning that it means, being positive. So, the cornerstone that this question posits on is antithetical to the idea of power duality as malefic that could be harmful or beneficial. Okay? So instead, this problem statement is trying to explore and exact the fundamentals of political power. And we've seen a lot of that thrown around, haven't we? Just about all our lives, but it's even worse now in this day and time. While the former part of the question is striving to deconstruct the soma of power itself, the latter construct of the question is focusing on the agency of an individual with political power. All right? Now, if you have read Frank Herbert's Chapter House Dune, and that was from 1920 to 1986, that's Frank Herbert, he writes all governments suffer a recurring problem. Power attracts pathological personalities. It is not that power corrupts, but that it is magnetic to the corruptible. You hear that? This is something that it's true. It's true. So, such people have a tendency to become drunk on violence, a condition to which they are quickly addicted. Rather than saying absolute power corrupts absolutely, Herbert reveals a common metaphysical denominator, okay, corruptibility that fundamentally connects all those with political power. My goodness, and have you seen? I don't want to get ahead of myself, so I'm going to go ahead and continue reading this, and then I will add my point of view, which really agrees with what they're saying here, of what he's saying here. So, rather than saying absolute power corrupts absolutely, we get that, okay? Corruptibility that fundamentally connects to all those with political power. All right. However, his semantic interpretation gives birth to more questions than answers, and that's the truth. And that's as I was reading this, I said, "Oh my goodness, this is the this is what's going on." Have you noticed there have been people who we voted for and they seemed like they were really nice, they were really concerned about the people, and after they got into office, it's a totally different thing. And also, I was watching an interview on YouTube of this person that interviews stars, uh, people who we call famous. And he had an interview with a man that is an actor. He's a performer because he sings too. And he had worked with a lady who is also now famous. They worked at the same show. They came up together. They're both famous. And they were, I guess you would call them friends and good acquaintances, very well acquainted on the show that they were on together in the beginning of their careers. So he said that as the years went on, and he finally, one day he was somewhere where she was, this lady was, and so he went to speak to her, and she just gave him a little smirky, mm, like that. And so he said, okay. So she won't get to do me like that. And then later on, there was another place, and I'm thinking, did she do it 3 times to him? I think she did it twice, and then he saw her somewhere else, and he wanted to see, hey, is this the way she's acting, or is this something else? Sometimes things can be on people's minds, and they can be thinking about something else. Something else can be bothering them, and so that causes them sometimes to act a little stuck up. So the the last time somebody told him, I saw her here and oh, she's here. Why don't you come on and say something to her? And he said, no, he said, because he is determined and said that he would not let her treat him like that anymore. So he would just stay away from her wherever she was. He wouldn't even try to go speak to her because I think she'd already snubbed him twice. I believe it was twice. Okay, so then this person kept saying, oh, come on, say something to her. Come on, say something to her. Oh, it's not like that. And he went and said something to her again. He let somebody talk him into it, and she snubbed him again. And so he is done. Power, power, power. What did Abraham Lincoln say? You can see it scrolling across the screen. If you really want to find out about somebody, give them some power. So we're going to go into this deeper, deeper, deeper. Okay? So rather than saying absolute power corrupts absolutely, Herbert reveals a common metaphysical denominator, corruptibility, that fundamentally connects all those with political power. And however, his somatic, and I know I'm repeating this, okay? Somatic interpretation gives birth to more questions than answers, okay? So suppose we take Herbert's argument in consideration and assume that the most corruptible are indeed attracted to power. You hear this? So let's just take this into consideration, and you'll see why in just a few minutes. Suppose we take Herbert's argument in consideration and assume that the most corruptible are indeed attracted to power. Now, in that case, the global political infrastructure, as we know today, is being built on the building block of corruption by its very virtue. For example, the fourth edition of the Global Corruption Index, GCI 2021, okay, covered 196 countries and territories and provided a comprehensive overview of the state of corruption around the world based on 43 variables. Now, listen to this. This is going to really register with you. As a matter of fact, I don't think you'll forget this, okay? This extensive data revealed that only 52 countries have a low corruption index. My goodness, with Finland and Norway leading the way. Now, on the other hand, the rest 144 countries are suffering from profane corruption. You hear that? Only 43 countries have a low corruption rate, and the other 144, they are suffering from profane corruption. Now, using Herbert's interpretation of power, using his interpretation of power and corruption, should we conclude that political corruption, which is about privatization of average citizens and the use of public sphere to promote private interests, is the foundational political infrastructure of these 144 countries? And if this assertion is true, does it mean that every government representative of these 144 countries are fundamentally corrupt? Herbert's simplistic interpretation of the problem statement creates a moral conundrum of either this or that. It's a difficult question, a difficult situation. Okay, a moral conundrum. So rather than exploring the connection between the two variables, power and corruption, okay, Herbert's simplistic interpretation of the problem statement creates a moral conundrum of either this or that. rather than exploring the connection between the two variables, power and corruption. This is something else. So, power does not corrupt. This is the second part of this. Power does not corrupt. He's come to the conclusion. It amplifies and reveals a leader's predispositional traits. You hear that? Power itself does not corrupt. It amplifies and reveals a leader's predispositional traits. Oh my goodness. For decades, social psychologists were convinced that power corrupts. For decades, social psychologists were convinced that power corrupts. One of the key demonstrations of this assertion was the classic, standard prison simulation experiment, and they call it the Zimbardo. It's Zimbardo 1971. They don't call it that, but when it was done, where volunteers were randomly assigned to play the role of prisoners or prison guards. Okay? So as the day passed by, it was observed that the students who were given the role of prison guards became sadistic and exercised their power to subjugate prisoners by taking away their clothes and forcing them to sleep on concrete floors. Now, this was like a simulation, this was a test, and you see what happened as the day went on. My goodness, wow. The results were shocking. However, the Stanford prison experiment failed to explore one crucial variable: the behavioral and cognitive pattern of students who willingly participated and were recruited to be a part of the study of prison life. To be a part of study of prison life. So, this is what he did. Thomas Carnahan and Sam McFarland in 2007 conducted an experiment revisiting the standard prison experiment. Could participate self selection have led to the cruelty? Now, let me read this again. Revisiting the standard prison experiment. And here's the question: could participant self selection have led to the cruelty? Now, what we're asking here: does power corrupt, or does it entice? Does power entice the corruptible? And we have all this research here that's been going on, and we have the answer. They wanted to study what kind of people participate and are drawn to the likes of the Stanford prison experiment. The research revealed that volunteers for the prison study scored significantly higher on measures of the abuse related dispositions of aggressiveness, authoritarianism, Machiavellianism, narcissism, and social dominance, and lower on empathy and altruism, two qualities inversely related to aggressive abuse. This is like in a day. My goodness. So what Carnahan and McFarland's experiment revealed was that power doesn't corrupt, but it is a phenomenon that is monopolized by the agency of an individual. I'm going to read that again. What their study and their experiment revealed is that power doesn't corrupt, but it is a phenomenon that is monopolized by the agency of an individual. Power amplifies and exposes cognitive and behavioral predispositions that already exists within you. My goodness. It amplifies power, amplifies, and then it exposes cognitive and behavioral predispositions that already exists within you. It merely reveals your innate tendencies. That means that's already inside of you. That's already inside of you. It merely reveals your innate tendencies, but it does not corrupt. My goodness. But it does not corrupt. So let's take another example of a Democratic statesman who wants to introduce a new health care bill for his people, but is unexpectedly confronted with an ethical conundrum. Difficult situation. Okay? He can either strengthen his political power and wealth by collaborating with pharmaceutical giants and increase the prices of the medicines. Oh, yes. In concern, demand supply chain. Okay? Or he can metamorphosize his proposed bill into reality and benefit his subjects. So, what will he do? We've all been through this, haven't we? The health care bill, and they call it Obamacare, and all the trouble, all the obstacles, all the hurdles, and then all the pork that was put in the bill to get the bill passed. You had to agree on this and compromise on this and that and the other. Okay, everybody wanted to put their little old thing in there. Okay, talking about power. Does power corrupt? Does power corrupt? Or does it entice the corruptible? My goodness, I'm learning. When I studied this today, oh my goodness, this is something else. We can understand now why people we know, and those of us know what realm we're usually in, our group of people, and we wonder why when they're so nice and kind, and then when they get position, get a little leeway where they can make decisions and do things and get some power, then they absolutely change for the worse. Absolutely change. Not everybody, but many we know of. Okay, many we know of. Many we know of. So knowing this, now we know what to look out for so it won't affect us. All right. Now, wow, what will he do? Since he already has procured political power and is deliberating on actualizing his health care bill to empower people, power here has not corrupted him. Okay? So, in fact, the argument that power corrupts collapses because if power indeed corrupts, this Democratic statesman would not have proposed a health care bill for the welfare of his people to begin with. All right. So, however, if he decides to enact the bill in favor of pharmaceutical moguls to increase his wealth and political status quo, it would be due to his predispositioned behavioral and cognitive schema for corruptibility. Wow, already inside. Oh, wow. What is that? The I know what it is. The scripture, and that came to me this morning. We are born in sin and shaped in iniquity. It's already in us. It's already in us. So if God doesn't save us from it, man, we've seen the results. Okay, we see it every single day. If He decides against, He's just exercising something that was already in it. So, how he responds to this ethical conundrum will mirror his political psyche. It has nothing to do with power being essentially corruptible. Power only amplifies and exposes a leader's predispositioned traits. Isn't that something? Isn't that something? So Frederick Hayek makes a similar point in his chapter, Why the Worst Get on Top, in The Road to Serfdom, and this was in 1943, where he highlights that individuals who rise to the top in the government are those who want to wield power and those who are most ruthless in using power. So this is what he writes. Neither the government administration of a concentration camp nor the ministry of propaganda is suitable places for the exercise of humanitarian feelings. Yet, positions like these create a totalitarian state. And that totalitarian state, we say these words, we read these words and everything, but that means what it means is that the person in charge wants absolute power. Nobody can have a say in anything but the one who is in charge. Totalitarian, okay? That's what that means. So, when a distinguished American economist concludes that the probability of people in power disliking the possession and exercise of power is low is similar to falsely assuming that the probability of an extremely tender-hearted person to desire a position of a whipping master in a slave plantation is high. My goodness. Whoa. My Lord. Recently, psychologists have reinvestigated this phenomenon and theorized that rather than being a corrupting influence, power amplifies leaders' innate tendencies. It brings it out, okay? For example, extensive research in leader corruption depends on power and testosterone by Samuel Bendahan, Christopher Zinder, Francois P. Prelon, and John Antonikis, okay, used incentivized experimental games to manipulate leaders in power. So here, leaders had complete freedom to decide monthly payouts for themselves and their followers. Now, they gave them the complete freedom. This was an experiment, okay? Now, leaders could have made a pro social decision to benefit the public good. However, they chose to abuse their power by invoking antisocial decisions, which reduced the total payouts of their followers but boosted their leaders' earnings with a high margin. The researchers write in study one, which is N equals 478, we found that both amount of followers and discretionary choices independently predicted leader corruption. Then in study two, which is called N equals 240, examined how power and individual differences, for example, personality and hormones, affected leader corruption over time. Power interacted with endogenous, endo, en, endogenous, excuse me, y'all. I've read this. Oh my goodness. Here, boy, come here. Endogenous. Okay, let me read this again. I messed the word up and then Fresh is over here experimenting. Study 2 equals 240 examined how power and individual differences, for example, personality and hormones, affected leader corruption over time. Power interacted with endogenous testosterone in predicting corruption, which was highest when the leader power and baseline testosterone were both high. And then honesty predicted initial level of leaders antisocial decisions. However, honesty did not shield leaders from the corruptive effect of power. My goodness. Oh my, it's something else, isn't it? Now we're going to conclude in this story right here. Wow. It's a super example of how power can entice a person into corruptibility. Okay? Concluding with Caligula, the mad Roman emperor. Okay. After years of witnessing the most barbaric purges, treason laws, exiles, execution, and corruption of all time during Tiberius's rule, Caligula from 37 to 41 AD was seen as a breath of fresh air when he took the throne. A breath of fresh air. Haven't we all? I felt like that when we got a new leader, especially if we're a Democrat, if it was a Democratic leader, or if you're a Republican, if you're a Republican leader, however it played out. When it came in our favor, the one that we favored won was like a breath of fresh air in the beginning. And sometimes it didn't end up like we wanted it to. But then we say let me see, half dozen in one hand and a half dozen in the other. hey, hey, sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. And hey, one might be just as good as the other, whatever, however that goes. So Caligula's, okay, here we go. He was seen as a breath of fresh air after he took the throne. They had been through so much with Tiberius. Now they have a breath of fresh air. Somebody new is on the throne. So after going through despondent years of constant fear, Caligula's initiation was perceived as a hope for a flourishing Roman Republic. At first, Caligula lived up to the expectations of the Roman people. He brought back many people exiled by Tiberius and ceremoniously burned the records of the infamous treason trails held by Saginus under the order of Tiberius. Oh, wow, he's doing some things, isn't he? The act was celebrated and made Caligula popular and well liked among the Senate. He then took a step further and eliminated unpopular hefty taxes, initiated constructions of harbors that created massive employment opportunities for Roman citizens, and staged lavish events like chariot races, gladiator shows, and theater plays to entertain his people. He was indeed a breath of fresh air after Tiberius. But here we go, at conjunction. But, and when we hear but, don't we kind of, hey, that gets our attention, doesn't it? But after 7 months, not years, after 7 months, his rule, things changed after 7 months under his rule, or into his rule. Things changed for the worst. Caligula started to use and abuse his political powers so dauntlessly that it pushed Rome into a dark age of political and economic instability. He went on a rampage of committing murder, adultery, and acts of debauchery. And that means all kinds of old uh, things, no limit to sexual sins and all kinds of things like that. This is what he went into. Just after 7 months, after 7 months, okay? His eccentricities became more murderous, including restating the very treason trials that he had ended. He dressed in silk robes and covered in jewels. He was dressed in the silk robes, robes, and he was covered in jewels. Caligula pretended he was a god. This is just after 7 months, okay? After the people thought they would breathe and they could breathe a breath of fresh air. And it only lasted probably a little over 6 months. He pretended he was a god. He made it mandatory for his senators to grovel and kiss his feet and seduced their wives at lavish dinner parties. He went to the absolute extreme. Does power corrupt or does power entice the corruptible? And we see it right here. Okay? He wanted his statue to be erected in the Temple of Jerusalem, which at the point would have been highly controversial in a region that was already prone to revolt against the Romans. Luckily, Herod Agrippa, who ruled Palestine, then, at that time, he was the ruler of Palestine, convinced him not to do so. Additionally, since Caligula was spending vast amount of money on his lavish lifestyle, he emptied Rome's treasury. My goodness. To reverse this damage, he started blackmailing Roman leaders and senates and confiscated their properties and wealth. He went all the way left, didn't he? So there is no denying that there was a method to Caligula's political madness, but power didn't corrupt him. Okay? Power did not corrupt him. If it did, the first initial 7 months of ruling Rome after Tiberius, Roman Republic would not have experienced economic, political, and cultural growth. Okay? However, power certainly did amplify and expose his innate characteristics of corruptibility and debauchery. It brought out what was already in him. Caligula's madness of abusing political power and tyrannical reign grew out of control. An assassination plot by a cabal of Praetorian guards in 41 AD. Okay? This is what happened. An assassination plot structured against him, and he was murdered after being stabbed over 30 times by a cabal of Praetorian guards in 41 AD. And a cabal is those personal guards that they have to protect them. And they are the ones that took him out, as we say. Okay? They got rid of him. This reminds me, the writer said, of what Robert Caro mentioned in his book, and the name of the book is The Passage of Power, The Years of Lyndon Johnson. And he wrote this in 2012. It was released. Power always reveals. So when a man is climbing, trying to persuade others to give him power, concealment is necessary. But as soon as the man obtains more power, and when we say man, we're talking about women too, because there's some corruptible, evil women out there. Evil women out there. But as soon as the man obtains more power, camouflage becomes less necessary. You hear that? As soon as he obtains more power, camouflage becomes less necessary. So to conclude, it is not that the power corrupts or is magnetic to the most corruptible. The truth is, power only reveals who you truly are. My goodness, what do you think about that? And this is Peru Verma, and she is a political analyst and a human rights activist. So you can find this in apaonline.org. apaonline.org. Now, and there is a response to this that I saw down here by John Campbell, one comment. And he wrote this April 21st and in 2022. He said, it would seem that power is an intoxicant like alcohol, reducing the inhibitions against antisocial behavior. And I thought this was on point too. But politicians are also embedded in a more structured system than simple social interaction, and they have gradually built that system to increase their power. And I totally agree with him. Politicians over the decades have built a warehouse of intoxicants, and in the past 2 years, they have been drunk on that power. I'm telling you, they have been drunk on that power. So, giving money and power to government is like giving whiskey and car keys to a teenage boy or to teenage boys, as the P.J. O'Rourke wrote. This is not simple cynicism, okay? So P.J. O'Rourke wrote this: giving money and power to government is like giving whiskey and car keys to teenage boys. And P.J. O'Rourke wrote this. So this is not simple cynicism. Those in power tend to think that their moral and intellectual superiority make them eminently qualified to do what they think is best, with decisions made in that alcohol laden warehouse of government. My goodness, he is telling it like it is, isn't it? They have also funneled power to other institutions in order to amplify their own power. And that's the truth. You think about the lobbyists. Think about them. They lobby. They give these people are giving them power by voting the way they pay them to vote. Okay, so the last 2 years have revealed just how little power the individual has in the face of political power. Power emasculates restraint, just like alcohol. The so called paradox of freedom is the argument that freedom, my thing here, I didn't secure it, freedom in the sense of absence of any constraining control must lead to very great restraint, since it makes the bully free to enslave the meek. The idea is, in a slightly different form and with very different tendency, clearly expressed in Plato. And this is Carl K.R.L. Popper who gave this comment here. Now, I'm going to psychology today. Good evening. Thank you so much. Good afternoon. Thank you for being with me. I really appreciate you for being here. And I hope and trust and I pray, hope and trust that your day is going very, very well. All right. Yes, this is what this person says, but you just hang in here with me, okay? You'll see what I'm talking about when I say they agree with each other. Adam Grant, PhD. And remember in the beginning, I mentioned his name. So, yes, power corrupts, but power also reveals. Why do people seem to become more selfish as they gain influence? My goodness, Frank Lloyd Wright is often touted as the greatest architect in American history, but he is also remembered as a man corrupted by power. Before he became famous, Wright was the head draftsman for the renowned architect Louis Sullivan. Sullivan tasked him to create drawings for the Charnley Cottage, a picturesque waterfront house in Mississippi, as well as a Charnley house in Chicago. Sullivan was a designing partner, and most experts assumed that he was responsible for the buildings. In 1897, Charnley Cottage burned down. Sullivan, who had fired Wright by this time, rebuilt it in the same character. Notes architecture expert J. Pridmore, suggesting that Sullivan regarded the original design as his own, okay? As his own. For decades later, 4 decades later, in 1932, Wright wrote in his autobiography that he was responsible for the Charnley work. Critics assumed that he was only claiming responsibility for the drawings, not the designs. After another 17 years, in 1949, Wright took credit for designing the house. Pridmore was suspicious. Despite the property's obvious Sullivan-esque elements, Wright claimed that design as his own. It had Sullivan all over it, but Wright claimed that he designed the whole thing, okay? So architecture professor Paul Sprague agreed. When the cobwebs of misunderstanding are finally cleared away, the evidence confirms Louis Sullivan as the author of the Charnley House. Earlier in his career, before he achieved eminence, Wright was more generous. You hear this? He was more generous in giving credits. He called Sullivan the master, describing himself as a good pencil in Sullivan's hand. According to biographers, Wright repeatedly acknowledged the positive influence that Sullivan had on his life and architecture. Okay, so why did Wright end up taking credit for the Charnley designs later on? How could he rob his mentor of all the credit, or at least partial credit? Excuse me, but I needed to do that. The natural answer is that power corrupts. As people gave Wright credit for his brilliant ideas, perhaps the fame and fortune went to his head. Thank you so much for being with me. This may be true, but there's a new line of thinking in psychology power reveals, okay? A new line of thinking. We may say power corrupts. Okay, now there in psychology, there's a new line of thinking. What is a new line of thinking? That power reveals. Hello, good evening, good afternoon, everyone that's with me today. I really thank you and appreciate you for being with me. Oh, yes, this is really, 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 really good. Okay, there's a new line of thinking, power reveals. Rather than turning Frank Lloyd Wright into a credit hog, it may well be that being drunk on power simply freed him up to reveal his true colors. My goodness. To illustrate, imagine that you are escorted to an office. You sit down and you learn that you and a partner will need to complete 10 tasks. Since the partner is running late, it's up to you to pick 5 tasks for yourself. You get to delegate the other 5 tasks to your partner. Some of the tasks are very short, others will require much more time. Will you act like a taker, claiming the short tasks for yourself and leaving your partner stuck with the long ones? Or will you be a giver, doing the time consuming work and letting your partner off the hook? Which would you be? So it depends on where you're sitting And here's another fascinating study. These studies are awesome. In a fascinating study led by the psychologist Serena Chin, people filled out a survey to determine whether they tended to approach interactions like givers or takers. When they arrived for the study, here we go, they were ushered into either a powerful or powerless seat. The powerful seat was a chair behind an imposing desk. The powerless seat was a guest chair in front of the desk. Okay, we've all been there, haven't we? So when sitting in the powerless seat, the takers acted like givers. They pretended to be generous, volunteering for the time consuming tasks and leaving the short tasks for their partners. In daily life, this is a strategy that takers use for impressing those above them in the interest of gaining authority and influence, trying to impress people. What do we call it? Brown nosing or sucking up to people, okay? So, when they were sitting in the powerful seat, the takers revealed their true colors. They grabbed the shortest tasks, sticking the givers with the lion's share of the work. Oh, yes, the seat makes a difference, doesn't it? Power frees us from the chains of conformity. As a team of psychologists led by Adam Galinsky finds, power psychologically protects people from influence. You hear that? Power psychologically protects people from influence. Because powerful people have plenty of resources, they don't need to worry as much about the negative consequences of impressing or expressing their values. This means that power often grants givers the latitude to help others without worrying about exploitation by takers or sheer exhaustion. For takers, on the other hand, power is a license to advance their own interest. My goodness. So Frank Lloyd Wright may have had taker tendencies all along, which were amplified as he gained power. Early on, these leanings were visible in his relationship with his son John, whom he refused. Now this got me, and then we know it's really obvious now. Early on, these leanings were visible in his relationship with his son John, whom he refused to pay a regular salary for his work. John, whom he refused to pay a regular salary for his work. So when John asked, Wright presented him with a list of the total amount of money that John had cost him over his entire life. You hear that? That's some terrible stuff, isn't it? So when John deducted a reasonable salary from a commission, Wright fired him. So when he deducted his reasonable salary from a commission that he had made, the son, the daddy, Wright, fired him. Fired him. My goodness. So as Wright gained power, he had fewer reasons to kiss up and more opportunities to kick down. He began insisting that his apprentices list him as head architect on all documents, regardless of his role. By the time he reached the pinnacle of the architectural ladder, he felt entitled to claim sole credit for collaborative work. Sprague suggests that Wright wanted the world to believe that his first mature style did not have its origin in Sullivan's work. My goodness. I mean, anything these people who worked for him, they designed, whatever work they did, he claimed the credit. It was mandatory for them to give him the credit on their work. And that's what happens when you go to jobs and when you sign that whatever you sign, you get hired on there. They have like no compete clauses, and then some of them tell you, well, if you invent anything here while you're on the job, then that belongs to us and all of that. So you have to be wise when you're dealing with these companies too, okay? Perhaps gaining power doesn't cause people to act like takers. It simply creates the opportunity for people who think like takers to express themselves. So, does power corrupt or does power entice the corruptible? Nothing discloses real character like the use of power, wrote Robert Greene Ingersoll, reflecting on the legacy of Abraham Lincoln. And this is what he said: most people can bear adversity, but if you wish to know what a man really is, give him power. And that is the absolute truth. So he says, for more givers, takers, and power, we can see Adam's new book, Give and Take, a revolutionary approach to success. And this is in Psychology Today. And Adam Grant, PhD, is a professor at Wharton, Wharton, and the author of Give and Take. This has been wonderful. Oh, it's after two. I had no idea, but this, thank you so much. Thank you for being with me today. So we've come to the conclusion that power doesn't corrupt, but it entices the incorruptible. So whatever's in a person, that power brings it out. Okay? It was already in there in the first place. So I love you so much. Thank you so much for being with me. And God willing, we'll be here. So I'll ask you to join me on let's see, Thursday at 1 p.m. Thank you so much for being with me. And I will get with all of you who are with me. I love you so much. Thank you for being here. Enjoy the remainder of your day.